I am an English teacher. I teach 10th grade English at English High School in Jamaica Plain. And I work in a program called the Pathways Program. So I'm an academic teacher, but most of my students are on a pathway to career and technical education, so they can specialize in a strand. And so as academic teachers, we really try to integrate technology and career skills into the academic curriculum. So the lesson plan or the unit plan that I created has some technology integration in it in terms of electronic storyboards and things like that. But it is a unit on the hero's journey with an anchor, the anchor text being the Odyssey. And so students really are, the goals of the unit really are to have them learn the central elements of the monomyth, which was outlined in Joseph Campbell's famous text, Hero with a Thousand Faces from 1949. So the goal is to have them sort of learn the idea of what an archetype is and what the hero archetype is, and then what are the stages of the hero's journey monomyth, and to be able to apply those elements when reading and analyzing Homer's Odyssey. They then are able to apply those same concepts or the same stages of that journey to the film Beasts of the Southern Wild, which came out in, I think it was 2012, and also to some other supplementary fiction and nonfiction texts. So it culminates in them creating an electronic storyboard using the program Storyboard. It's a website that's free for teachers. That you have to get a premium subscription to do some of the have some of the features, but they can create electronic storyboards, and also to have them write an expository essay at the end of the unit, integrating the text that they've read and the ideas that they've seen throughout the unit. So the first kind of goal for the students is to think about what is like a quest narrative. What does that mean? What defines a hero? How can we apply these ideas of the hero archetype and the hero's journey to our own lives and make that relevant for students? And then to be able to think about how can you change and mature through taking heroic action. So it really starts the year off. This is the first unit that I like to do. And it sort of gives students a sense of applying symbolism and archetypes across text and how you can do that. And the idea of the hero as being somebody who achieves great things for the group, for civilization, or for the tribe as a concept. And when they read later in the year things like Othello, or this year I've done To Kill a Mockingbird and Night by Elie Wiesel. So it's this idea of thinking about an individual as being part of the group and how one person is really capable or can be capable of achieving great things for society or humanity. So those ideas and concepts that students really need to be able to apply later in the year as we do other texts we create that foundation with this unit. So the first idea is to have them think about the term archetype. And they have not heard this term usually by the time they are in 10th grade. It's a very new concept for them. But of course, they know what an archetype is. They just don't know that that's what it's called. So it's this idea of bringing them through that understanding by looking at heroes versus villains and applying that to, you all know heroes and villains, right? Comic books, fairy tales. And we go through that to start with. And once they've grasped that concept, we start to look at the hero's journey. And so the hero's journey, I find for students, can be a very complicated concept to grasp because there are many stages, and even just the diagram, sometimes they become overwhelmed, just as you or I would look at it and think, oh my gosh, what is going on here? So the goal really is to review each stage, but then have them apply it before we start applying it to a text, to movies or stories they've seen. So they kind of really buy in and become engaged when you start to say, this idea of the hero's journey and the concept of the monomyth is something that we've seen in many films and read in many stories, forever. So we look at thinking about Harry Potter or Star Wars or Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, Finding Nemo, and they start to see that this concept can be applied across multiple forms of media. So, we go through the hero's journey structure, and we study that for a while, and we look at it, and we try to apply various stages to things that they've already seen in the past. And then we look at Beasts of the Southern Wild. So that's the first thing we use to think about the hero's journey. And so I've found in the past when I've tried to do this that it's very hard for students to sort of hit the ground running applying this concept to the Odyssey. So I started using this film, which I'm not sure how many people have seen it, but it's an amazing film, and it's about a 6-year-old girl who lives in a remote Delta community, and basically the sort of, the setting is the bathtub, but it's really Louisiana Delta, and so they look at, this community, which is this vibrant community, but it's extremely poor, and there's, just a lot of underlying concepts that I think they can sort of relate to. But the 6-year-old girl, Hush Puppy, lives with her father, Wink, and her mother has died, and she is very much an independent little girl. She lives in a tree house behind her father's house by herself, and she is she's a heroine, but she's a very little heroine. So she basically has to go on this journey to go find her mother and search for her as the rising waters are threatening to pretty much overtake their community. So it's sort of, I think that it's essentially, Hurricane Katrina, and looking at that as a sort of an underlying historical event. So they can kind of, they have access points to it. So we watch this movie, which is wonderful, and they love it. And then they're able to apply the stages of the hero's journey to Hush Puppy's journey to find her long-lost mother. So these are some stills from the film. It's very visually beautiful and just very vibrant. So the goal is, when we're watching the movie and applying the hero's journey archetype to it, is to think about the idea that there's a literal journey and a metaphysical journey, a symbolic journey. And so that can be a hard concept to understand if you are applying it to a text, I find, because my students sometimes, they're so focused on being able to unpack complex text, and the comprehension really is a primary focus for us. So it can be difficult if they don't have the background knowledge or the basis or the foundation for the hero's journey already to apply that directly to a text right away, and to think about what a metaphysical journey is. So when we think about Beasts of the Southern Wild, they're able to see that Hush Puppy goes on this literal journey, and she, is going through the bathtub, as they call it, on these rafts, and there's just sort of a sense of adventure that exists, but also that it's a journey of physical and emotional growth for her to try to understand what happened to her mother and what her place in the world can be as a young girl with no female role model or comfort that she really misses. So we use the hero's journey archetype, and we sort of pause the film as we're watching it to apply stages to the film and to fill in our it's like a graphic organizer, basically a blank chart. And then they are able to use some examples from the film in their essay, and the prompt really is what I want them to focus on throughout the unit, which is, what does it mean to come home? A literal and symbolic sense. So we read the Odyssey next after we've done the film, and so I choose certain books. We don't read the whole thing. It's obviously very long, and it would take a long time to break it down and go through it. I mean, we could spend all year on the Odyssey, as you all know. So we read certain books from the Odyssey, and I really like to also supplement the book with the graphic novel by Gareth Hinds, which is amazing and very visually beautiful, but also stays very true to the plot. And so it helps struggling readers to reinforce comprehension, but I also use it to embed some of those analysis skills and critical thinking skills, because it can be much easier to look at images with smaller amounts of text and think and analyze critically, and then scaffold that sense of analyzing an image to analyzing text. So I also sort of try to embed some of those skills into it too. And then it also gives them a model for when they create the electronic storyboard, because there are similar crossover elements in terms of combining text with images. So we use Storyboard that for the electronic storyboard. So as they're reading the Odyssey and supplementary books from the graphic novel, they're filling in the same graphic organizer that they've used for Beasts of the Southern Wild to match stages from, or books from the epic into the stages of the hero's journey. This is a picture of my students who are very awkward and embarrassed when they have to have their picture taken, but us looking at Gareth Hinds' graphic novel. And I mean, I've used it now for 3 years, and students love it. And so we're going to read Macbeth this year, and Gareth Hinds has come out with a new graphic novel for Macbeth, so I'm really excited to also use that during my Macbeth unit. This is an image from the book. It's hard to see some of the text, but this is obviously a Cyclops. That's their favorite book, and the images from that in Gareth Hinds' graphic novel are very beautiful. So these are some panels from the Hero's Journey Storyboard project. And Storyboard, that, I don't know how many of you have heard of it or used it before, but it's a wonderful resource. And so they have all of these sort of unit resources. So, you know, they have it for different novels and texts, and they have a great one for the Hero's Journey. So you can basically download a template and then use some of their stock images and use some of their stock images to create your own storyboard. So they have different templates, so students can create their own using their own images, and they can pick and choose from what storyboard that offers. But it's also really helpful to have the template, because you can download the template and customize it, and they can choose you know, how to visually portray it. So these are some images from that storyboard. And so, you know, just the different stages of the hero's journey is what I want them to create, and using the Odyssey to do so. So you have the image, and then I also ask them to use text or a caption underneath to explain the example from the text and how it represents that stage of the hero's journey. So you have just some sample images here. And you can get very complicated. So some kids can really, they love it, and they're able to apply layers and filters, and, you know, they're doing all kinds of things. But students who have a tough time can also access it. And, you know, obviously I've tried to use it myself, and it can be very hard. But it's easy enough to use if you lack, you know, you're not, you know, very good with technology. But also if you are, you can really do. It has a lot of capacity. So it's a very cool resource.
Lily, we're going to have to wind up quickly. So.
Okay, so I'm pretty much done here. This is the unit assessment. Is this idea that they're going to culminate in a final essay? What does it mean to come home? Thinking about the symbolism of home, and is it the journey or the goal, right? What is most important here, and how does that apply to the hero's journey archetype? And so they're integrating evidence from the film, from the Odyssey, itself, our anchor text, and also some supplementary texts here. We have some poems, and I have also used an essay, Back from War but Not Really Home, which is about veterans returning home from war and thinking about how all of those things can also apply to this hero's journey archetype.